Hello, and thanks for joining us. My guest today is Christopher Mayfield. He's the Chief Engineer for Cloud DevSecops at the Naval Information Warfare Center Pacific. Chris, good to have you with us.
Good to be here, Tom. How's he doing?
All right. First of all, give us the overview of the command, the Naval Information Warfare Center. And
Sure.
for people that may not be initiated, what exactly happens out there?
Yeah. So within the Department of Defense, especially here in the Navy side, we have a couple what we call Science and Technology Reinvention Labs underneath NAVWAR, so Naval Information Warfare Command, also hosted out in San Diego. And out in San Diego, we're just the Pacific arm of that in Charleston, North Carolina, South Carolina, sorry. Tons of my friends out there at Naval Information Warfare Center Atlantic. So at NAVWAR Pacific, we kind of think ourselves as like the biggest nerds in the Navy. So primarily supporting the surface side of the Navy, not like a Nav Air and Pax River, as we were talking about earlier, or Nav Sea, who actually they like to blow stuff up and make big things like that. We primarily run the IT and the C4ISR side of things. So we have a very humongous branch of amazing postdocs. Very hardcore science gets done. Anything from doing artificial intelligence and machine learning for underneath a hull, how many barnacles are stuck to a ship and how do we get those out, to building UAVs that can both swim and fly, cool stuff like that. But my side is primarily making sure from the cloud aspect and all the agile DevSecOps stuff that's storming everything in the DoD. How do we enable all that for everybody at the command? So about 5,000 people, not including the contractors, gives us about 12,000, 14,000, all 100% nerds.
Amazing. Okay. And just briefly, maybe describe how you get requirements in from the fleets and the operational sides of the Navy that are afloat.
Sure. Yeah, that normally starts. So the iteration of going all the way out to the sailors out there, which I was one for a long time, getting the feedback from the fleet itself through what we call our type commanders. So when you have a carrier or destroyer or a cruiser, right, we're going to have all these problems and issues and how we take the mission threads. It's kind of weird. It starts all the way at top at the CNO's level when they kind of designed how we're going to build the fleet for the next couple of years. And then that gets pushed out, right, to the program executive offices, to the PMWs, PMSs, all that fun stuff. And then it finally gets to us. And then the goal is, hey, like in the Canes is something very large that NAVWAR Pacific builds called Canes. So all the major ships out there have this enterprise system that everything kind of runs on if you're one of these large deck ships. And then back in the day when I was a young sailor, it'd be like, wow, this stuff is terrible. Can you build it better? That feedback gets sent, no kidding, directly straight to NAVWAR Pacific and NAVWAR Land on how we build things even better. And then hopefully, we get some cool funding out there to come take it over. But NAVWAR Pacific is very unique. We are what's called a Navy working capital fund. So much like contractors in the DoD, we have to go make money and bring mission funds in to go build it out for whatever those requirements are. But happy to say that we have quite a lot of veterans and former sailors and Marines. Even Army and Air Force, they're like the military. We'll bring them in. So a lot of in on the ground feedback and real use cases that we can build out. It's kind of unique that we get to do that in San Diego.
And something you said too, Canes, caught my attention because a system like that, you just don't deploy one day and all the ships in the fleet have it. This
No,
is
and
a multi-year rolling process. And by the time you're done with the last ship, probably the first ship is saying, golly, we could really use this, that, and the other. So would it be fair to say that you're in a state of continuous development on both
always,
new
yeah.
and existing systems?
Yeah, our former Navy CIO, Admiral Barrett, she had kind of started us out on this quest called the Compile the Combat in 24 Hours. And the dream was something as large as Canes with the our 300, 400 ships out in the fleet. How do you upgrade their IT infrastructure as fast as you upgrade an Apple or Android phone app? That was the goal. I could tell you that 24 hours on C2, C24 has been dropped. It's a huge fight. It's massive stuff. The other day, we just saw a huge press release with Admiral Gilday and Admiral Kilby about Project Overmatch, talking about the Teddy Roosevelt, which we use as kind of a status standard bearer for how we do a lot of the IT delivery within the fleet and make it as fast as possible. I'll be honest, there's a lot of things in there. I'm like, wait, we're going to do that by when? So it's going to be exciting. There's a ton of people working this very, very difficult effort. Because as you know, may not know, in the Navy, we talk on the order of decades, right, on how we're going to develop and deploy new systems. So this is a huge shift for a lot of people, and how you do this as fast as you can, as the commercial world does. And hopefully, I'm in the middle of making that happen.
Well, having seen the extent of electronics below decks on a couple of battleships, you do understand that one does understand that there is a lot of software that can probably be developed and deployed initiated maybe faster than a physical system like a gunnery platform.
Right. And what's funny is a lot of the high tech, high speed, low drag things that we develop, when we finally do get it out to the ship, you realize, 1970s three-phase power doesn't play well with, a Amazon Snowball Edge hooked up to the side of the ship. So, right, things like that you're not ready for. Like I said, huge paradigm shift within the Navy.
And getting closer to cloud here, you mentioned machine learning, artificial intelligence that are activities in the development area that you are doing at the command. And those are often associated with cloud. Maybe talk about how cloud fits into the general set of
Sure.
activities that are important.
Yeah, and yeah, it's funny we say AI ML. It's really it's a very tiny AI, a very huge ML. So from the machine learning aspect, when you're training all of these models and how they want to learn, it takes a lot of resources, a lot of virtual machines, a lot of instances. So doing it at scale, being extremely elastic and flexible, we're very much trying to go for more cloud native things. I'll be honest, most of the machine learning stuff we do is just straight Python. But now, how do you do that at scale and have, say, self-healing code, self-healing things that we routinely break in the Navy so they can fix themselves? That's a huge project, huge goal. A lot of people are going for. It's really exciting stuff. It's really neat. I have some very good friends that run NAML. Dr. Katie Rainey, she's amazing. One of our best assets at NIWC Pacific. Who pushes a lot of, actually, you guys should interview her next. But but yeah, from the machine learning side in cloud, it really is about like, okay, do I have the budget for 10 of these, or can I run 1,000 of these? And that difference, right, brings it much faster, as there's plenty of foreign actors and adversaries out there that we're trying to keep neck and neck with. So all the investment, the capital expenditure to get more machine learning in cloud is just going to make it go that much faster.
Okay, so let's talk about you've had a lot of experience migrating projects to the cloud and developing in the cloud. Those are two different things, really. Migrating an
Mhm.
application to the cloud that might be an existing one, and developing new, under a DevSecops model, new capabilities which originate in the cloud. Talk about the differences between use of cloud for those two
Sure.
different classes of activity.
Yeah, it's very different. We like to say like every ship is a snowflake. Every project in the Navy is a snowflake too. So between taking legacy systems that, no kidding, are still written in COBOL or Fortran, and lifting those up to cloud and trying to re-enable them, reinvent them, and modernize them and push it out. And while I think a lot of Agile and DevSecOps work is, hey, how do I containerize this? And you hear it over and over and over. Not always the goal. I think there's a lot of very important things, especially when it comes to weapon systems, where that doesn't make sense. And when we have live data that we get a touch in there in the testing phase, bring it in, it really can break the system if you're depending on these containers of the DevSecOps side to keep it up and running. Case in point, on the lift and shift of taking legacy apps, or maybe your project is very different, as we see a ton of S&T work, and as part of the research and development test establishment within the Navy, there are a lot of things that don't come to fruition that we, have our own internal grant process for how we fund those. And it's great, right? We get to play and really do hard R&D. But at the same time, like those big, huge ACAT 1, ACAT 2 programs like Canes, when you're doing the DevSecOps arm, I think there's a lot of good work. I know Miss Jane Rathbun, she just started a task force for DevSecOps. One of my good friends is leading that. So how we get to, something like what the Air Force and that the DoD Chief Software's Office with Nick Shalin, how they've developed Platform One, which we're just about to partner up with some aspects of their work. Do you need one huge DevSecOps pipeline to rule them all, or are you going to have a couple more specific niche pipelines to help out? So the idea, especially where the overmatched software armory comes into play out of NIWC Pacific, It's a mix. We kind of feel like it should be one size fits all for everybody in the Navy, but we do have some excellent developers working on something called Black Pearl, which works in conjunction with Platform One. Biggest difference, I think, within most of this DevSecOps world is what DoD network are you touching? Can you deploy there immediately? Because that seems to be the hard charge of things like DI2E and other aspects out there of, hey, this is great. I deployed all my stuff. I've put my code together. I'm ready to spit my container out. Where can I put it? And now with PAC, right, we have a humongous challenge no other service has. We got to get these things out to the fleet. A really hard idea to grasp around when any one of us here could have a Tesla and you're going to get an update overnight immediately. You didn't have to do a thing. So how do you emulate that within the Navy at like the scale of the fleet? That's kind of the challenge. I think a lot of the DevSecOps pipelines out there, no matter what service you're in, are trying to figure out a path for. Personally, this is just Chris talking. I think the sweet spot is you're going to have a handful of pipelines out there to support very specific missions and projects. That's okay. That's okay. It's just stuff gets expensive very fast, but how you do it efficiently, that's I think whoever can figure that out for everybody, that's going to be the key.
But fair to say the cloud is an important piece of that machinery of pushing that stuff out to the fleet. That is to say, you don't do it when they're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean where there might not be any connectivity, but in port, there might be a
Yeah.
cloud nearby and a connection.
We're going to try. That's the goal, especially not getting into too much detail on Project Overmatch, but that is a goal of no kidding. We love to joke, especially the developer community. Hey, the Admiral wants that red button blue. So how do you do that at speed and at scale in 10 seconds for something that's 15,000 miles away? That's the goal. That's what we're going to try. But yeah, as it comes back to the cloud reach and cloud aspect and that connectivity, I like to say in cloud, like 80% of the problem is the network. So if you can figure that out, or anything that touches the network is a cloud problem. But we're very open. I know there's very large things, certain 4-letter contracts that we're not sure we can touch yet within the DoD. But honestly, I pointedly asked the Department of Navy CIO, hey, are we going to be multi-cloud for the future? And he said, yeah, I think we definitely will stay that way. And I think of all the cloud providers, be it Amazon, Google, Oracle, Microsoft, Azure, they all have very good strengths. Some have cons to them, but at the same point, it's about that capability delivery. No matter what that project or the PE or PMW wants to deliver, we want people to have the best possible path for them to deliver that. So I think between all the clouds out there and cool new, I know we've got Starlink and stuff like that for even greater reach out at the satellite side. It's getting better. So I think in the 5 years, you're going to see some massive shift within the DoD. That's going to bring that cloud even closer, right? That edge computing thing we always talk about. There are a lot of projects out there, but that's it, right? It's been science projects.
Sure.
So yeah, it's very cool stuff.
So given that the cloud is both a medium for development and also a distribution medium for software in a production environment and so on, it's many different things. And you mentioned a multiple cloud approach. To what extent do the specific services provided by different cloud providers, and they're not all the same, or they would all be the same, do you use those in conjunction with what it is you're developing and deploying and pushing and so on, all those life cycle phases? Do you take advantage of the specific services that might be there in the cloud that you don't need to duplicate in the Navy?
Yeah, it's a good mix, right? Not to get too much in the weeds, but when we have the FedRAMP process and disadjudication for what the DoD can use of the cloud native services out there. Right now, today, I'll be very honest, it's a mix between a lot of Amazon built-in stuff and a lot of Azure built-in stuff. I think a lot of projects are still trying to figure out how to integrate those and what is or is not allowed. There's a very hard, how do you control your intellectual capital, your IP, right, within the Navy, especially, so that I'm not sure I want to show all of this to Amazon and Azure. I need to keep it inside, but man, their tools are really cool. So there's a blend in there about no kidding protecting, right, FOUO, CUI data and making go as high speed, low drag as something you'd see for instance, like the machine learning, right, that happens within Tinder, it probably blows away anything we do in the Navy right now. So how do you bring that same capability into, right, like I mentioned earlier, like we just want to do like hull checks, like make sure we're not, deteriorating while this boat or the ship is sitting out in the port for so long. But now let's do some really good math and like figure that out. So, right, that's a critical piece. I think that's something we don't want any adversaries to get their hands on. So bringing in the mix between homegrown, home-built systems inside a cloud that can touch and use the cloud native engine, so to speak, that help machine learning. We're going to get there. Right now, it's a pretty good blend.
We're speaking with Chris Mayfield. He's Chief Engineer for Cloud and DevSecOps at the Naval Information Warfare Center Pacific. And you started to touch on it, but what's your best advice for the challenges in dealing with multiple cloud suppliers, understanding that you need different things from different suppliers depending on what it is they have as specific services and terms? What are some of the other difficulties, or let's put it this way,
Sure.
what's your best advice for dealing in the multi-cloud world?
Make sure the network is as flat as possible. Something I think unique we did out at NIWC Pacific. When you're on your RDT&E laptop, there is no difference between, say, the IP space of like touching a server you put in the closet down the hallway or hitting something inside of Azure. We want to make it as flat as possible so that the seamlessness between all of the networks, all the cloud service providers, that it's invisible, meaning that I could hop, say, from Amazon to Azure, have things touch each other almost seamlessly. That's a key component. And right, that's why I think a lot of people, we want to say we're cloud agnostic. It doesn't matter, should not matter where you put your project, where you put your code, where you're building your stuff out. That'll work with anything else within the Navy itself for testing, development, certification, that you can reach it out there. So contracting is a whole nother story. But once you do get there, I think it's making the network as flat as possible between all the cloud providers makes life so much easier.
Interesting. Okay. And so that's not something you can necessarily put into a service level agreement because that's on you to make the network flat.
Right.
What about dealing with the providers?
They make it easy. I'll be honest. They make it easy. We're no kidding, talking to Google right now on how we're trying to figure that out, because they did something unique that nobody else in the DoD cloud space has done, right? They have a global presence with their network. So how do you logically separate? Because right, normally you see physical separation, like, hey, only in the lower 48 CONUS where your data centers are going to live. Google's a little bit different, but they bring some kind of cool stuff to the table, especially in the AI and ML space that we want users to get to. But at the same time, yeah, the challenge being, once these virtual private clouds or the virtual networks, like on the Azure side, they're all pretty clean. It's all kind of standards. I wouldn't say there's one global standard for everybody who plays in that space, but they make it easier on our end to actually connect on the back end, make those connections, make those layer 3 and below routes available. Then right, yeah, it's on us on our side, and we're very lucky. Now Pacific, we ride on the DREN, the Defense Research Enterprise Network. So the dislinkages and how we connect to NIPRNet, other things like that, not too difficult once you're up in the cloud space and you've got a secure environment. But yeah, very, very different from, say, contractors who, hey, I got a GovCloud account. It's what we call impact level 2. They're using, say, Amazon IP space that is non-DoD. So how do we connect, control, and execute at that side too? We're just dipping our toes into that end, but yeah, it's getting easier. I'll say that.
But there is definitely an important security tail that kind of wraps around all of this too. Maybe
Yes,
talk about that briefly.
it is massive. I can't count how many at higher levels, some of the mistakes and the hacks and the hey, I forgot about this, forgot about that. Next thing you know, you have a foreign entity within your network. We see it quite a bit. Honestly, there's some people who they're not so sure, they went a little too fast, and then they're, hey, can I migrate onto your cloud, where it's a little bit more secure? We may be too secure actually, but it's all good, right? Because you're protecting, no kidding, DoD intellectual property at that level. But yeah, the security aspect for us to go so fast, we did not recreate everything in the cloud because we had a flat network between on-premise and in the cloud. We could use, I'm sure anybody listening, the fund that is ACAS and HBSS for your security side, we basically just made our on-premise data center assets for that reach into the cloud to check everything out and make sure, STIG compliance and SCAP and all that kind of fun stuff. But yeah, there's a lot of cloud native stuff, like this idea of the cloud native access point, where we're using 100% cloud native things to protect and defend up at that level that make go really high speed, low drag, and bringing that more commercial feel. I think we've been pretty good about that at NIWC of emulating as much as you can on the commercial side within our environment. Granted, the guardrails are pretty tough, but once you're in there, my job is to let you loose. I want to get out of the way, let you go nuts and develop and make those good mistakes and keep iterating, keep making good things.
Yeah, we've come a long way since AutoDIN. And let's talk about data for a moment, because implicit in any development work, such as training, machine learning algorithms, and so on, is data. And if you're dealing with multiple data centers of your own or servers, and also multiple clouds, you need to have a data rational strategy to back all of this up, especially with multiple clouds. Describe some of that work for us.
Sure. And yeah, thank goodness, kind of the rules and stuff we set up way back in like 2003 within the Navy for how you handle and control that data. It doesn't change just because you're in cloud or you're doing DevSecops at scale. That one, much like every ship in the Navy, is a snowflake. Every project has their own data requirements. It's a tough one because we live on the research and development network. So there are some aspects to what we'd call live data that we can't necessarily touch. We do see, especially on the ML side, machine learning side, you see quite a bit of emulated data or data that was, 5 years old, but it's still the same format. It's not fun doing it that way, I'll be honest. We have a large cache of that in order to do testing as much as we can. But it's a little bit different when you're getting your hands on, live F-35 GPS data to inject into the system. That's fun stuff. So that aspect and how we control it, it's very different. There's a whole bunch of different zones and what you can do at certain impact levels to make that happen. It is very ad hoc. It is very project dependent. But like I said, the ground rules for how you collect and control that data that have been with us for decades, it's still the same. A lot of people like to joke cloud is just other people's servers. From the DoD's point of view, when you're actually touching that data, very true. It doesn't change anything. You're just doing it faster.
And do you use any kind of brokerage service to adjudicate between you and negotiating directly with all of the clouds and all of the services they offer?
Yeah, in the Navy we do. Our service is a little bit different. We're actually in the middle of changing that. So we did have this idea of the Navy brokerages. NIWC was one of the first ones. NIWC LANT is one. Nav Air is one, and pretty soon here NavC will be one. So it's a little change of, in the beginning of cloud, especially when I was cutting my teeth on the DoD cloud side, it was the wild, wild west. It was any contract you could get, put whatever cloud service provider you could get and go. So I think right now we're in the middle of, the beginning of the middle of phasing that idea out, trying to go for a more centralized, more controllable aspect of that. And things like JEDI, I think, will help whenever that comes out. And that's actually a realization. That will help a little bit for the production side, right? Because you have your dev test and then production. Production side, that will make a lot of help. That will make things much smoother. But the RDT&E side about that multi-cloud, that's still going to exist out there. But yeah, I would say a little bit more consolidation of the brokerage model. Some brokers aren't even brokers. We call them Navy technical agents, technical cloud agents who execute cloud for all the projects at the different labs. But it's all good stuff. It's a very immense cats and dog wrangling here, and how you make sense out of that and control it, let alone the budget impact that has with having 8 million cloud contracts. I'm sure at the top levels of as an RDA, they're like, what are we doing? So yeah, we'll get there eventually, but I think the transition just started.
And a final question, doing so much work that you do in the cloud as a DevSecops and cloud engineer, and so much of the Navy's work now dependent on the cloud, this must have been something that in some sense eased your work when the pandemic hit and many civilians just streaming into the buildings and bases.
Oh, it quadrupled my work, because I think at the very beginning, we have some very smart, cool people out of the cloud computing office that had put CVR together with the help of Microsoft Azure to help alleviate the collaboration. Because right, with the massive workforce we have working from home, in a lot of aspects in the beginning, we weren't ready. It was still, hey, can I have a dial-up number in order to have this meeting? And those got expended the first week of stay-at-home orders. And then when cloud came along and more people moving in, trying to do certain things, I know I constantly am on the edge of, this is either going to be the greatest thing for the command or someone's going to fire me. It was like that a lot in the beginning of the pandemic. But yeah, I think at the highest levels, especially at the highest levels of the DoD CIO's office, they made some very, very good strides to trying to help us collaborate and use the cloud backend. No kidding, hats off to Microsoft. That team busted their butts for quite a long time to try and put everything together to get us where we are today with just the constant meetings we have, just using, say, Microsoft Teams. It's all good stuff. I think we're going to get better. There's a lot more changes, and I know a lot of feedback I personally receive on how we can do things better. But no, I think the ease and the model that we've had before of, hey, everyone needs to be in the office at X time, that's gone away, right? We're doing it right now here on Zoom Gov. It'll be interesting to see what the fallout is. I think there's a large cadre of personnel we have that, it's Cybernet work or it's JWorks work. They have to be in the lab. We have to get them on base. But hopefully that's not the norm, that most people, can still collaborate and do what they have to do by VPNing in or doing cool things like a virtual desktop infrastructure, things like that. But I wish it would have made my life easier. Absolutely not the case.
My guest has been Christopher Mayfield. He's Chief Engineer for Cloud and DevSecops at the Naval Information Warfare Center Pacific. Thanks so much for being with us, and back to you all in the studio.